My name is Daryl from Podcast.co, and in this video, we're going to outline a simple step-by-step process you can use to create your episode show notes as efficiently as possible. Would you put on your shoes without tying your laces? Well, that's essentially what you're doing if you publish your podcast episode without decent show notes. You're leaving the job incomplete. Show notes are important. Think of them as a hub of helpful information that helps listeners get to grips with your episodes at a glance. These days, everyone is so pressed for time, so the more accessible you can make your podcast, the better. Providing concise, written summaries can persuade new listeners to check out your latest episodes, or provide previous listeners a helpful list of topics you covered in older episodes. They're also especially important if you're hoping to drive traffic to a website off the back of your podcast. They bring new visitors to your site through two main funnels: organic SEO and direct referral traffic from your listeners. But more on that later. For now, let's cover the basics. Firstly, what do we mean by show notes? On the most basic level, show notes provide a written overview of each of your episodes. They're similar to the episode description you input on your hosting platform, but usually much more detailed. They typically offer things like more information about the episode, a timestamp breakdown of the topics covered, some background on your guest or guests, and a list of useful links to any resources you mentioned within the conversation. Basically, stuff that's of benefit to your listeners. Show notes come in lots of different layouts and styles, but they usually look something like this. Good show notes allow interested listeners to engage with your show on a deeper level. As we mentioned before, they also ensure that your episodes can be found on Google. So how do podcast show notes help boost your podcast SEO rankings? Well, search algorithms can't yet hear your episodes, so they need to be able to read them instead. In order for your podcast to rank on Google or any other search engine, you need to create at least some associated text to go along with your episodes. This will allow the algorithm to crawl your episodes and index them in the results page. No show notes equals no organic search traffic to your episodes. But you'll need more than a title and a few slapdash sentences to get on page 1 of Google. For optimal performance, your show notes need to contain at least 300 words and be optimized for a single target SEO keyword. That might sound a bit complicated or technical, but don't worry, we'll explain exactly how to do that shortly. Alongside SEO traffic, show notes are perfect for encouraging your existing listeners to check out your website. If people are tuning into your show regularly, some of them will want to go beyond simply listening. They'll want to dig deeper into the topics you discussed. So be sure to remind them about your show notes during your episode intros and outros.
As always, you can find links to all the things we mentioned in this episode in the show notes.
Used in this way, helpful show notes can act like a magnet, drawing listeners to your site. If listeners know there is usually lots of useful stuff to be found in the show notes on your website, it'll keep them coming back again and again.
Dang.
And over time, this significantly increases the chances listeners will purchase your product or service.
Please get out there, get yourself some merch, and get out there.
If you're working hard to create great episodes for your audience, but it's well worth investing a bit of extra time in show notes to maximize the ROI of your podcast. Because ultimately, more relevant site traffic translates to more downloads and sales of your product or service. But of course, you haven't got endless time. You need a process that will allow you to be as efficient as possible.
I've always been notoriously bad at trusting the process.
So, here's what to do. First, match your episode to a specific search intent. Think about the main theme of the conversation you had. What's the central message of the episode?
Message!
For example, if your guest happened to be a marketing expert, then the central theme might be effective strategies to increase your Twitter followers.
Message!
If your episode covers lots of different topics, then choose the one that you feel is most important. Use the focus of the episode to create an appropriate SEO keyword to rank for. In the example we just gave, the most appropriate keyword would be something like, how to get more Twitter followers. You then need to optimize your show notes around that particular keyword. Keep the focus narrow. It's very unlikely that you'll be able to create show notes that will rank for several unrelated keywords. So select your keywords and stick to it. Put it in the episode title, page title, URL slug, and scattered throughout the notes themselves. After selecting the most appropriate keyword, it's time to write a Google-friendly intro. Write up a short introduction for the episode, introduce your guest, and focus on communicating the central theme of the episode. Make sure your keyword is found in the intro at least once. But don't go overboard. It will read terribly, And even worse, Google may penalize you for keyword stuffing. Next, embed your episode player so it appears prominently at the top of your web page. If you're using Podcast.co to host your show, which you should be, you can do this by simply copy and pasting a short bit of HTML code. Next, provide a time-stamped list of topics you covered. Breaking your episode down into time-stamped bullet points will help appeal to the different listener types that come across your show. If your episodes are quite long, having this list will allow them to quickly skim the page and pick out the information most relevant to them. Remember, not everyone has time to listen to entire episodes.
Because we're all busy.
Limit yourself to one descriptive, tightly worded sentence per bullet point. When you're done, your breakdown should look something like this. Next, give some further background on your guest. If a guest was kind enough to come on your show, then you should return the favour by linking to their site and promoting who they are and what they do. Show your appreciation by including some additional background in your show notes. You should be able to find more than enough background with a quick search on Google and LinkedIn. You should also point listeners towards their social media profiles. Lastly, it's important to provide your listeners with a list of relevant links from the episode. Of all the elements in your show notes page, this is the most important part for drawing direct traffic from your podcast. If listeners want to learn more about something interesting they heard in the episode, they should be able to find everything they need here. Feel free to include anything you feel is relevant. You might want to list websites, books, news articles, movies, research, or other related podcast episodes. Helpful signposting like this allows you to develop stronger relationships with your listeners.
Son of a podcast.
It essentially highlights the fact that you're creating the show with the intention of helping them as much as you can. For example, podcasting veteran Tim Ferriss is known for publishing very comprehensive link sections for all his episodes on his website. He routinely encourages listeners to check them out. These essentials provide a solid foundation for great show notes, but feel free to get creative. There may be other elements you want to add in as well, depending on the nature of your show. By increasing your podcast visibility on Google and giving listeners a reason to visit your site, creating more helpful show notes is a great strategy to boost your overall success of your podcast. And that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please consider hitting that like button. And if you've got any questions about podcast show notes, drop them down below. See you next time.
Want to skip the learning curve and launch a top-tier podcast right off the bat? Then let the professionals handle it for you. At Podcast.co, we offer an all-in-one production service for brands, artists, and thought leaders, and we take care of every single step, from branding and editing to marketing and distribution, and the results speak for themselves. Send an email to David at Podcast.co today to learn about how we can work together.